Hi everyone, this topic is about elasticity and we have 3 videos for this, and this is the first out of the 3 videos. Now, what is elasticity? It is a central concept in economics and is applied in many situations. Basic demand and supply analysis explain that economic variables such as the price, income, and demand are causally related. Elasticity can provide important information about the strength or weakness of such relationships. Now, you have learned from the law of demand that when there is an increase in the price, there is going to be a decrease in the quantity demanded, and vice versa, ceteris paribus, or assuming that all the other factors are constant. But the question is, how strong or weak is this relationship? Well, it all depends on the product, and it also depends on the reaction or sensitivity of the buyers. Because let's say if the price increases by 5%, there is no guarantee that the decrease in the QD will also be 5%. There is a possibility that the decrease in the quantity demanded will be higher or lower than 5%. Now, this degree of sensitivity to the change in price is what you call elasticity. To be specific, that's price elasticity of demand. So we will be able to know whether people are, or the buyers are sensitive, not sensitive, or very sensitive with the change in the price. Elasticity refers to the responsiveness or sensitivity of one economic variable, such as the quantity demanded, to a change in another variable, such as price. So if we take a look again in the law of supply, we said that if there is an increase in the price, there will also be an increase in the quantity supplied. So we see a positive relationship. But then again, we are not certain whether uh, the responsiveness or the reaction is strong or weak or moderate. And that kind of reaction, the degree of reaction or sensitivity, will be measured using elasticity. To be specific, that's price elasticity of supply. So let's talk about the different kinds of elasticity later. But for now, to better understand this topic, let me ask you this question. Okay, imagine that you just came from a heartbreak. You got your heart broken. So how hurt are you? Or how hurt were you during that time? Were you like, meh, okay, you were not that sad at all? You weren't happy also? So you did not feel anything. Or maybe you were sad, or maybe you were sadder, or maybe you were at the saddest point in your life. So it really depends on on the degree of reaction or sensitivity that you have towards the change in that variable. So that variable that has changed is your relationship status from being in a relationship to being single, for example. Now, let's take a look at this at the point of view of or not really an economist, but maybe from the point of view of a consumer. So how sensitive are you with the price increase in a fuel? So right now, we are seeing that fuel prices are increasing significantly every week, although in the past weeks there has been a rollback, but the price right now is a bit or much higher compared to the price 2 months ago or 3 months ago. So when the price of fuel increased, okay, we experience that we experience a decrease in the quantity demanded for sure. So you check the reaction of your parents, or maybe your reaction to the change in the price of fuel. So how sensitive were you, or how sensitive were your parents when the price of fuel increased? Did they react at all or not? They did not, or possible, there is a possibility that they did not alter their gas consumption. So there was no reaction. They did not increase, they did not decrease their consumption of fuel. Or probably they decided to decrease the gas consumption by 20%. Or they decreased their gas consumption by 50%. Or they had a very sensitive reaction. They decided to stop using the car so that they won't have to spend on gas. So how sensitive were they? Now, these kinds of reactions or sensitivity from a low degree to a high degree is measured by elasticity. We can put a number to this, we can actually measure this, and we'll be able to know whether they're very sensitive or not sensitive or just somehow sensitive. These are the different types of elasticity. The first one is the price elasticity of demand, which I have already discussed partially earlier. It measures the responsiveness or the sensitivity of the quantity demanded to a change in the price. Again, it has something to do with the price increase or the price decrease. And then what happens a price increase? We experience or we expect QD to decrease. And when there is a price decrease, QD is expected to increase. But the degree of sensitivity or responsiveness of QD is measured by the price elasticity of demand. Okay, so the one that is considered as the independent variable is the price, and the one that is dependent on the price is the quantity demanded. PED can be measured over a price range called the arc elasticity, or at one point called the point elasticity. So there are two formula later that we will be studying. Another form or type of elasticity is price elasticity of supply. It measures the responsiveness of quantity supplied to a change in price. So once again, if there is an increase in the price, we also expect an increase in the QS. But the sensitivity of the QS to the change in price will be measured using the PAS, because we said that although we already expect that they have a direct relationship, we are yet to find out as to how sensitive this QS is to the change in price, because it's possible that the sensitivity is low, and it's also possible that the sensitivity is very high. Another type of elasticity is cross elasticity of demand. It measures the responsiveness of the quantity demanded of one good or good X to a change in the price of another good or good Y. So for example, there was an increase in the price of fuel, and fuel is related to cars. So the increase in the price of fuel would have possibly influenced, okay, or affected the demand for cars, not the quantity demanded, but the demand for cars. So the cross elasticity of demand will measure the sensitivity in the demand for cars whenever there is a change in the price of the fuel. So price of good X, okay, affecting the demand of good Y. Another example would be, let's say, beverage A versus and beverage B. Let's say beverage A is a competitor of beverage B. So when there is a change in the price of A, let's say the price of A decreases, then we expect that some people will start buying B, right? Because they will be looking for a substitute. No, they will start buying less of B because A is now cheaper compared to B. So what will now be the effect of that to B? So probably there will be a decrease in the demand for B. Okay, naturally, because A is now cheaper. But we just want to check how sensitive the demand of B is to the change in the price of A, because it's possible that decrease in demand is just 1%, or maybe 5%, or maybe 80%. So this kind of sensitivity is measured by cross elasticity of demand. How is it different from the price elasticity of demand? In the price elasticity of demand, the price that is given is the price of the main product in question. But in the cross elasticity of demand, we're talking about the price of product X, and then we're checking the sensitivity in the demand of another product, probably product Y or product Z. So two different products, okay? And the last is income elasticity of demand. It measures the responsiveness or the sensitivity of the quantity demanded to a change in consumer income. Remember, we said that income is one of the factors that can influence demand. Okay? Most of the time, if there is an increase in the income, demand will also increase. But again, the question is, by how much will the demand increase? If income increases, will it increase by 5%, 10%, 100%, 200%? So that kind of sensitivity is measured by the income elasticity of demand. Okay? I'd just like to point out that we said already in our discussions in the past that it doesn't always follow that if there is an increase in demand, increase in income, there will also be an increase in demand because it depends on the kind of product. Okay? Always remember, but if we're talking about inferior products, like for example, dried fish is quite, we're not talking about the luxurious kind of dried fish. We're talking about the simple dried fish. Dried fish is usually cheaper. So when your income is high, you buy less of it. So the demand is lower. Okay? So do not assume that at all times, whenever there is an increase in income, there is also an increase in demand. It actually depends on the kind of product at the same time. Okay? But for income elasticity of demand, what we are concerned here is the degree of responsiveness. Is it very sensitive to the change in the income, or just somehow sensitive, or not sensitive at all? That's income elasticity of demand. But we focus on the price elasticity of demand. So again, price elasticity of demand shows the relationship between the price and QD, and it provides a precise calculation of the effect of the change in price and QD. So again, price changes, QD changes. Okay, by how much QD change, that's what's going to be measured by the price elasticity of demand. Okay, so there are two ways, or there are two formula that we can use to compute for the elasticity. Actually, whether you're computing for the price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, income elasticity of demand, or cross elasticity of demand, the formula will still be the same. This is the generic formula. Okay, but right now we'll use this for PED. But then again, later on, if you will be asked to compute for the different types of elasticity, you can use this generic formula. Now, what is arc elasticity of demand? It is the value of the price elasticity of demand over a range of prices and can be calculated using the standard formula. Usually this is the arc elasticity formula. This is preferred because it gives you a more accurate answer compared to the point elasticity formula. Okay, so this is the formula, Q2 minus Q1. What is Q2? Q2 is the new quantity. Q1 is the old quantity. Okay, P2 is the new price. P1 is the old price. Okay, so what we're talking about, why do we have P1, P2, Q1, and Q2? Just like what I said earlier, we are measuring the price elasticity of demand because we expect that there is a change in the price. And when there is a change in the price, there is a change in the QD, and we want to measure the sensitivity of your demand to the change in the price. So let us say, for example, originally the price of your product is, let's say, 10. That's going to be your P1. And with that particular price, the number of items being bought is 100. That's going to be your Q1. When the price increased from 10 to 12, this is your P2, there was a drop in your quantity, okay, because of the law of demand, to 80. Okay, so you can now apply these values to your arc elasticity or to your point elasticity formula. Okay, whichever you're gonna be using, you will be able to compute for the elasticity PED coefficient. Okay, so you can do that now. you can pause this video and try computing for the arc elasticity or point elasticity coefficient. Whatever answer you get, that will be subject to an interpretation, which we will discuss in the next video. So there is a possibility that your answer in the arc elasticity is a bit different from your answer in point elasticity, because this one, as you can see, Q2 minus Q1, you divide it further by the average of your new quantity and old quantity. Whereas here in the point elasticity, after getting the Q2 minus Q1, you just divide it by the original quantity or Q1. So there is a difference here. Okay, and you divide it all over P2 minus P1 over the average of P2 and P1. But in this formula, in the price point elasticity, is just over P1. Okay? But between the two, arc elasticity is preferred because it gives a more accurate answer. I hope that that's clear. So how is elasticity relevant for decision makers? Particularly for price elasticity of demand, it will enable you to identify the best pricing strategy that will increase your revenue. But first off, let's say you have already computed for the elasticity coefficient using the arc formula or the point formula in the earlier slides. When your coefficient is greater than 1, you have an elastic demand, which means that demand is sensitive to the change in price. If the coefficient is lesser than 1, then you have an inelastic demand, which means that demand is not sensitive to the change in price. When you have an coefficient that is equal to 1, then your demand is unitary elastic. So to illustrate, it will look like this. At first, let me just draw everything. So there is this law of demand that says as price increases, quantity demanded decreases. Okay, so in an elastic demand, when price increases by 10%, since people are sensitive to the change in price, the drop in the Q will be greater than 10%. Let us say it's 15%. In an inelastic demand, since the consumers are not that sensitive to the change in price, so when you increase the price by 10%, the drop in the Q will just be around lesser than 10%. Let's say it's around 5%. When demand is unitary elastic and when you increase the price by 10%, the decrease in the Q is also 10%. So they're the same. That's why when you divide the two percentage changes, the equivalent answer is 1. Okay, so this is elastic demand, inelastic demand, and unit elastic demand. So what is the best pricing strategy if you find out that your demand or the demand of your product is elastic? If that is the case, then the best thing that you can do in order to increase your revenue, by the way, revenue or total revenue is price times quantity. So the best thing that you can do in order to increase your TR is to decrease the price. Okay? How come? Because if you decrease your price, let us say by 5%, and since they will react inversely, the increase in your Q will be greater than the decrease in your price since they are sensitive. So if you decrease your price by 5%, your Q will increase by, let us say, 10%. This is just an example. Okay? So is this a better situation? Yes, this is a better situation because even though you decrease your price by 5%, but your increase in Q will be able to cover up whatever decrease in the revenue that this decrease in price will contribute. So this increase in Q will cover up the decrease in your P. Okay? That's why decreasing the price in an elastic demand is better in order to increase revenue. Now, what about if your demand is inelastic? What is the best pricing strategy? The best pricing strategy if you have an inelastic demand is to increase the price to increase revenue. Let me illustrate. So if you increase the price here, let us say by 20%, assuming that they are not that sensitive, okay, and the law of demand applies, the Q will decrease, but since they're not that sensitive, the Q will decrease by a lower percentage. Let's say it will only decrease by 15%. So even though there is a decrease in Q by 15%, but the decrease in Q will be covered up by the increase in price, which is 20%. Because usually in an inelastic demand, the one that has a greater change is the price. In an elastic demand, the one that has a greater change is the quantity. So this is a better option, which is to increase the price, because even though Q falls, but the decrease in the Q is lesser than the increase in percentage form in the price. So this is more favorable for you. What about if your demand is unitary elastic? So what do? Actually, whatever you choose, whether you increase the price or you decrease the price, it will give you a constant revenue. So let us say you increase the price by 20%, your Q will also decrease by 20%. Since we are talking about change in percentage form, not in monetary form, so definitely there will be no change in your revenue when you either increase or decrease your price with a demand that is unitary elastic. Okay, so this is how elasticity is relevant in decision making for managers in a firm. Now for our next slides, we'll be talking about how we're going to apply the elasticity formula, and we'll also be talking about the different types of demand.